Chapter 1. Meet Henry Green. There are some people who say that Henry Green wasn't really born, but was hatched, fully grown from a chocolate bean. Can you believe that? Anyway, this particular Henry Green we are speaking of was really born, not hatched, and had a wonderful mom and dad in the bargain. His father was tall and lean and wore eyeglasses, except when he was sleeping or in the shower. Mama Green, whose name was Enid, was a short, slim woman with blue-gray eyes and a tiny mouth that always seemed to be on the verge of a smile. They all lived in an apartment in the middle of the city, along with Henry's older brother and sister. Mark Green was 10 and tall and very good to Henry, except when they would argue, which was often, and then he would hit Henry on the head with anything that was handy, which sometimes was hard. But mostly, Mark was fun to be with, and only got angry when Henry called him Marco Polo. Mark didn't like that, and who could blame him? Henry's sisters were very, very old, almost 14. She didn't ever argue with Henry or Mark. In fact, she hardly talked to them at all, because she was so old and wise and almost grown up. Her name was Elizabeth. The other morning, which was a school day at the end of the week, called Friday, Henry, Mark, and Elizabeth were at the table in the dining room having breakfast. Mark was eating fried eggs. Elizabeth was quietly chewing on her usual breakfast of buttery toast and milk, and Henry was midway through his usual breakfast too. Chocolate cake, a bowl of Cocoa Krispie cereal with milk with chocolate syrup to make in the milk to make it more chocolatey, washed down by a big glass of chocolate milk and 5 or 6 chocolate cookies. Sometimes when it was left over from the night before, Henry would have chocolate pudding too, and on Sunday mornings, he usually had chocolate ice cream. The truth was that Henry was in love with chocolate, and chocolate seemed to love him. It didn't make him fat. He was a little on the thin side, in fact. It didn't hurt his teeth. He'd never had a cavity in his life. It didn't stun his growth. He was about the average height, perhaps even a little taller for his age. It didn't harm his skin, which had always seemed to be clean, clear, and fair. And most of all, it never gave him a bellyache. And so his parents, perhaps not being as wise as they were kind, let Henry have as much chocolate as he liked. Can you imagine a boy having a chocolate bar sandwich as an after-school snack? Well, Henry did, just about every day. And when he ate mashed potatoes, just a few drops of chocolate syrup swished through seemed to make them taste a lot better. Chocolate sprinkles on top of plain buttered noodles were tasty too. Not to mention a light dusting of cocoa on things like canned peaches, pears, and applesauce. In the Greens' kitchen pantry, there was always a giant supply of chocolate cookies, chocolate cakes, chocolate pies, and chocolate candies of every kind. There was ice cream, too. Chocolate, of course, and chocolate nut, chocolate fudge, and chocolate marshmallow, chocolate swirl, and especially chocolate almond crunch. And all of it was just for Henry. If there's one thing you could say about Henry, it was that he surely did love chocolate. Probably more than any boy in the history of the world, his mother said. How does Henry like his chocolate? Daddy Green would sometimes joke. Why, he likes it bitter, sweet, light, dark, and daily. And it was true, up until the day we are talking about right now. Chapter 2, A Strange Feeling. Better hurry, kids, Mama Green called from the kitchen. It's almost 8:30. Let's go, Slowpoke, said Mark. Mark said to Henry, we don't want to be late. Just one more chocolate cookie, said Henry. He popped it into his mouth. Still chewing, went to his room to get his books. On the way to the front door, Henry went through the kitchen and gathered a handful of chocolate kisses to put in his pocket. He liked to have them handy to munch on at school. But this morning, because he still felt somewhat hungry, Henry stripped the silver wrapping from 2 kisses and popped them into his mouth. Then, after a quick kiss from Mama Green, a kiss that left a little bit of chocolate on her face, Henry, Elizabeth, and Mark headed out the door on their way to school. At the corner, Henry and Mark waved goodbye to their sister, who had to take a bus to get to our high school. The boys' school, PS 123, was just another block away. At the next corner, Mrs. McIntosh, the crossing guard, waved them across the street. The light is always green for the Greens, she said. It was her own little joke. And she said it just about every morning. This morning, only Mark, who's extremely polite, smiled. Henry just didn't feel like smiling. In fact, he was beginning to feel a little strange. In the schoolyard, the boys went their separate ways to join their classes. As usual, there was a lot of pushing and shoving and fooling around, But Henry, who was always very good at things like knocking hats off boys' heads and making goofy faces at the girls, was quiet. He didn't even say hi when Michael Burke, his best friend, came along. "Well, what's the matter with you?" said Michael, grinning. "What do you mean, what's the matter?" Henry said. "Can I just stand here? Do I have to carry on and behave like a nut?" Okay, said Michael. "You don't have to bite my head off. It's just that you're kind of different today. Not like you at all." Just then, the whistle blew, and all the children began marching into the school building. "I feel funny today," Henry said to Michael. "I have the feeling something's going to happen, and I don't know what." That exact feeling that something was going to happen stayed with Henry all morning. That something was going to happen stayed with him. He felt strange in his homeroom, strange when he went to gym class. And in Mrs. Kimball Farber's math class, he felt strange all over. Henry couldn't concentrate on what Miss Kimball Farber was saying. He just sort of sat there and stared without thinking about it. He was looking at his arm and the back of his hand, and he noticed something. There were little brown freckles all over his skin. Now, this would not have been such a startling discovery except for one thing. Those little brown freckles were not there when he woke up this morning. At the front of the room, Mrs. Kimball Farber was going through the drill on fractions. She was saying, "And if I take 6½ and subtract 1¼ what will I have left?" She looked directly at Henry, who was looking directly at his arm. "Henry," she asked, "what will I have left?" What will I have left? Okay, that's where we're going to stop. "Little brown spots all over," said Henry.